10th of November 2022. In this Skidmark I'm going to talk about the scourge of load shedding again. I did do a Skidmark earlier on solar, and there is many stories coming out about people that are disappointed after they've done those installations, those, let's call it the so-called off-grid installations. And there are a lot of unscrupulous providers out that are capitalizing on people's fears and frustrations. Now, when it comes to the load shedding in South Africa, and you must understand that this Skidmark is done specifically around load shedding in South Africa, and the things that I'm talking about is the stuff that I experience locally. Maybe the same in other countries, it may be different. But here in South Africa, the load shedding schedules are roughly 2 hours, 2-hour sessions. Depending on the levels of the stress, those 2-hour sessions can be fairly shortly one on the other. And that is a bit of a problem. But so many people do grudge purchases. And then afterwards, when reality kicks in, they are deeply disappointed. Now, if you want to take your house on the so-called off-grid route, you must understand you are looking at something between 120 to about 400,000 rand and more. Now, what we should take into consideration is that the most important thing for us is to accept the fact that there's electricity shortage, to accept the fact that electricity is getting more expensive as days go by, and we must also accept the fact that we will have to adjust our lifestyles. Now, it sounds very romantic to say I'm going to take my house off the grid, but you are talking about a hell of a lot of money. Doesn't matter how you look at it. And if you want to save on the money, you can save if you have the skills and the ability to do a lot of the installation work yourself. So that is that. I'm going to talk to those of us that just want to get by, just to be able to maintain a certain level of comfort during a load shedding session. Now, I have spoken in my previous Skidmarks about the role of a UPS, it's an uninterruptible power supply, and after upgrading mine and really watching the performance on the thing, I am very comfortable to say that the UPS is a good way to go. What will that UPS do for you? That UPS will be able to keep your computer going, your phone going, your Wi-Fi going, and your TV going. And that is already a big thing, because at least you are connected and you can keep yourself busy. And when it comes to UPS, you must be careful. Don't buy those little pisswilly things from the computer shops. Those things don't work. What you are looking for is a UPS that takes a proper deep cycle battery. Now that battery can be either a lead acid battery, which is the cheapest option, and then I myself decided to go the lead carbon way, and the battery cost is 50% more, but there's a big difference. The lead acid battery has got a lifespan of 500 cycles, and the lead carbon battery 5,000 cycles. So it's 10 times more, and the price difference is only 50% more. So that was not a difficult decision for me to make. Now, you do get really fancy UPSs, and the price ranges are from roughly about 15,000 rand to about 40,000 rand for a UPS. Now, the more expensive ones have got lithium-ion batteries and all things like that, but that is a lot of money. Mine cost me, when I bought it, 10,000 Rand plus the battery. That was 12,000 Rand in the total in the end. And then 5 years later I had to replace the battery, and that's when I put the lead carbon battery in. And then after monitoring it closely for a week, 2 weeks, I realized that the 2-hour load shedding session is pulling the battery too low. It falls to 20% of capacity, and that is too low. If you keep on doing that, you will ruin that battery very quickly. So I added a second battery, because my UPS could handle 2 batteries. And that made a huge difference. Just before I started recording this, I checked, and we are now 1 hour into the load shedding. My wife is not here, so the TV is not on. So it's only my office and the Wi-Fi and the security cameras, and the battery capacity is still sitting at 100%. That is great. Now in the next hour it will most probably drop, and it should end at around about 85%. Now that way the batteries will last. So the UPS is your first option. The second thing that I want to suggest is get yourself a small camping freezer. Now this image that I'm showing you now, that is something that you don't want. You don't want something like that, because the moment you open that door, all the cold air runs out of it. You want something like this, a chest type. And there are hundreds of models available on the market nowadays. When I was still camping a lot 20 years ago and that, things were fairly primitive, but you get very nice fridges, freezers, that is portable, that you can use in your car. It runs off 12 volt and so forth. Now the advantage of a small fridge like that is that when it goes really bad, you can plug it into the UPS and it shouldn't kill that UPS battery too quickly. But that is just an emergency. The reality is you keep a fridge like this, and the load shedding schedule is fairly accurate. That's one thing that Eskom is doing properly, because if they say it will last from say 9 o'clock until 11 o'clock, you can be sure around about 9 o'clock, before 9:05 the lights will go off, and about between 11 and 11:15 the lights will come back. They are fairly competent when it comes to that thing. Okay. So why do I say you need a little fridge like this? In this you can keep butter, cheese, milk, just those things, to be available during the load shedding session. So if you want to make a cup of tea, you take the milk out of this little fridge. You don't open your big fridge, because that is when things go wrong, because that's when the cold air runs and falls out of that fridge. Now in my house I've got 2 fridges, double door stuff and so forth, and they've got this fancy electronic monitoring systems in it, and I know that over the period of 2 hours that fridge internal temperature will go from 3 degrees C, and that's in the fridge side, to about 7 or 8 degrees in that 2 hours. That's when if I don't open it. And the deep freeze side will fall from -20 to around -10, around about there. What is amazing about the new modern types of freezers is that those things are back onto temperature within 30 minutes after the power comes back. So what you want to do is prevent opening those things during the load shedding session, and especially important when you have small children and so forth in the house. So this little camper fridge is a nice thing to tide you over during those 2 hours without endangering all the food and stuff that is in your big fridge. That is just a suggestion that you should take. Another thing is, what you can do is take these plastic 2-liter juice bottles or what, and freeze 2 of them full of water. Freeze them, and if you know that the load shedding is going to start at, say, 10 o'clock, 9:45, you take those frozen bottles of water out of your deep freeze and you put it into your fridge and you close the door. So then you've got a source there that will help keeping the fridge cold. Because with the fridges, if it is empty, it will get warmer faster than when it's loaded properly. If you overload it, you've got a problem. And by adding that frozen water into the fridge, you are giving a source there that help keep that fridge cold for that 2 hours. It's like an ice pack that you put in a normal cool box. And that's another thing. If you don't want to buy a small portable fridge, you just take a normal cool box and put your milk and your butter and your cheese and whatever, cold meat or something, so if you want to make a sandwich and things like that, into it, and put 1 or 2 bottles of frozen water into it to keep it cold. You've got an advantage there that if you're in a situation that during load shedding you don't have water, you also have the advantage that iced water bottles, they will melt and you have some source of some fresh water. The next thing that you should look at is some form of a rechargeable lamp, just to have a bit of light when this load shedding happens to you at night. I prefer candles, but candles is really dangerous, and it's not the safest thing to do. But again, there are thousands of options available on the market today. Get yourself 1 or 2 rechargeable LED lamps. I personally hate these white LEDs because that light is cold and unpersonal, and I don't like it at all. My son spoke to me about it last night, and I said to him, just go to an art shop and buy some of that film that they use to make slides and so forth, and get something in a light yellow, and very light yellow, and cut it out and stick it over that white LED lenses, just to get some ambience. And then, here is the important thing, the thermo flask. Get yourself a proper thermo flask. So when you know the load shedding is at 10 o'clock, before 10 you take your kettle, you boil water and you fill that flask up, and you use that to make coffee or tea. And these things, the thermo flask, is something that will help you save on your electricity consumption. That's what it will do. Because that kettle, to boil that kettle, takes a lot of power. And you boil the kettle to make 1 cup of tea. So get yourself a flask like this, boil the water, put it in and use it. You can use it. Some of these flasks will last for a whole day. You'll save a lot of electricity there. The same, take a microwave oven. The things are 1,000 watt. You use your microwave oven. You draw 1,000 watt. That to give you an indication, with that 1,000 watt you can power 200 LED lights. Think about it. And then another big user of electricity is things like your toaster, things like a hair dryer. Those things are really hard on electricity. So by adapting a bit, you're not only going to make yourself a little bit more load shedding proof, you will also get into the habit of doing things that will save on your electricity consumption. Now, there will be many guys that are going to differ from me and so forth. I think personally, a good UPS is the first step to go. And then, if you really want to save electricity and help yourself also, the next investment should be a solar geyser. After you've installed a solar geyser, then you must make the decision on how much lifestyle changes you are willing to. I personally, I have a gas stove and I've got a very good gas braaier, which I use. So cooking is not a problem for us when the power is down. The oven is obviously an issue, but my braaier has got it's got a dome that can close up, so I can use it in certain dishes. I can do it by using it as an oven. But the most important thing is, be careful of grudge buying, because they can irritate you to such a point that you lose your sense of logics, and then you spend a lot of money and a year later you realize that it was not worth it. You've spent 200 or 300,000 and it's not there. I personally are of opinion that the Eskom power provision is managed to be used as a tool to pressure us and to control us, and it is the politicians that are doing it. And keep this in mind, those politicians, they will terrorize us with load shedding, but they will never allow a total grid collapse, because a total grid collapse will automatically also mean the government will collapse, and that's not something they want. So I hope you find this informative and of value. My UPS, to put it back to you, the thing cost me 10,000 Rand, and I have spent 6,000, just over 6,000 Rand on the 2 batteries. And it lasts comfortably 2 hours. It looks like I will be able to get with a push about 3.5 hours out of it. So that is under 20,000 Rand. That makes a big difference compared to 200 and 300 and 400,000 Rand. And then the other problem with the solar, and I see it here today, the last 3 days the Lowveld was cloudy and so forth. Your solar panels, the efficiency drops dramatically if that happens. I have seen an article that a guy wrote where they did a grudge buy and went off grid, and then he realized it was not the right thing to do, and he monitored his system very critically, and over a period of 6 months the data he collected confirmed that the solar panels that was installed on his house was of a certain watts which they rated for, and over a 6-month period, on average, the average performance out of those solar panels was 17%. So think about that. So if you really want to put a solar system up to really take your house off grid and you maintain your current standard of living and equipment in that house, you must install at least 3 to 4 times the amount of solar panels. And on that note, please hit a like, subscribe and share the thing. And I will keep you posted on my experiences here in the bush. Thank you for your support.